Hey friend, welcome to Authentic Performance, the podcast. My name is Nat and I'm your host. At Authentic Performance, our mission is to provide education and advocacy for all athletes, developing awareness surrounding identity, purpose, and health, so athletes can live well beyond their sport. Today, you get to hear from one of my very favorite people in the world, my mama. My mom, Kristi Osborne, is a former multi-sport junior college athlete and current second grade teacher. She has also coached many sports and has supported myself, my younger brother, and my younger sister in all our athletic careers. She has had some incredible experiences that shaped her as an athlete and encouraged her to pursue a relationship with Christ. Growing up, I always went to my mom for advice, so I'm so excited for you to get to learn from her as well. I know you all will love her as much as I do. Now here's my mom, Kristi Osborne. All right. Welcome, Mom, to the podcast. So excited to have you today.
Hello.
I would love for you to tell everyone a little bit about yourself, even though I already know lots about you. Let's let the listeners hear a little bit about you.
I'm Natalie's mom. I grew up in a small town, very small town. I live 30 minutes from the same small town I grew up in right now. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. 4 sports, actually. I ran track my senior year. Went to a small community college, played basketball and volleyball. And then I graduated from Southern Oregon University with my teaching credential. I've been teaching for 19 years. Currently teaching second grade. And I did take 8 years off in the middle there to have kids and be a stay-at-home mom. But just living the dream, still teaching. Yeah. 2 kids in college, 1 kid a junior in high school, about ready to be an empty nester after next year. So happy to be on your program.
Thanks. So to start things off, we're going to talk about your athletic career. What were some of the things that you experienced as a junior college athlete? What was that like for you?
It was really hard. I was at a small high school and very successful in sports, in all the sports I played. And then actually even just going to a small community college, it was very difficult to not just play all the time, right off the bat. And just socially, I was young. I graduated when I was 17 and turned 18 right away, but still was 17 when I graduated. So it was very difficult. After my first season of basketball, I just went so bad. I thought I was never going to play again. Didn't want to play. Was very burned out. Ended up playing volleyball my sophomore year and having a really good time. Got orthotics for my shoes and actually wasn't in pain all the time. So did play basketball my sophomore year too. And we had really competitive teams, and I played a lot more my sophomore year. So I was a little happier, but it was a huge transition, even from a small town program to a small junior college program. There was a huge transition time, and it was a very difficult time in my life.
What were some of the major challenges you would say just with the junior college program? Like, I know for me, one of the biggest things about being at a JUCO is you're only there for 2 years, typically 2 or 3, if you redshirt or have some kind of different circumstances, but that's a very unique experience in sports, especially in comparison to being at a school for 4 years and having, someone from 18 to potentially 22 or 23 on a team and being, with a smaller pool, I guess, age-wise too. What were some of the challenges with that?
One of the big challenges, I was living with my sister. I'm a twin. So we went to the same college. I feel like, and then lived off campus in an apartment. So I feel like I had a difficult time. I had acquaintances, but not real close friends. So that part was hard. Also just the time issue. I was a straight A student in high school and having to balance everything in life. I remember getting my first couple of B's my first semester. I thought I was going to die, and then I pulled it together, but it was just hard. And just having that freedom and that kind of stuff that you don't have in high school. But I was always ready for the next sport in high school. So after volleyball, I was just like, all right, bring it on. Now I want to play something different. And then basketball came, and then softball came. And so in community college, when you focus on one thing, you're playing basketball all year round. So it's conditioning and it's, fall ball and spring ball. And I feel like it wasn't as much fun. That part is hard because I loved sports, but I got pretty burned out on the one. That's why I really liked my second year. I played volleyball as well. And I had a couple of, back to back, two practices of volleyball, two practices of basketball that overlapped. So that part was really hard, but I enjoyed myself so much playing volleyball because it was different, and I got to change sports. So that part was hard, but I just think emotionally, I wasn't prepared. I was just pretty sheltered as a kid. And I think and I didn't really have anybody to talk to. We had a trainer and again, I was in pain my whole freshman year. So that was tough. But just even, I remember being very emotional on the court because I didn't get in. Like the one game that I didn't get in, I usually played about half the game and, went in the first quarter about halfway through. And then the one time I didn't get in the first half, I remember thinking I was horrible and why didn't I play? I was really emotionally, it was hard for me. I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people underestimate the junior college program as well. Like, I remember, I did before I got to that level was like, well, it's just junior college. Like, it's not that hard. But I think most junior college programs, if you're competitive, you could beat potentially at a very similar level to a D3 or even D2 school, competitive wise. It's just a different format, which is,
right.
I think almost sometimes harder because those other schools, if you're at a D1, D2, I would say, maybe even some D3, you have a lot more support probably than JUCO because the resources are just
there's no money.
There's no money at all. Like even our trainer, we did have one, but she was not great. Like would just say, well, don't play if it hurts, that kind of thing. And I think it was just because no one else wanted to be there because it's this tiny little JUCO and you're not getting paid any money. So then unfortunately that trickles down to the athletes and then you have some hardship that maybe other athletes might not,
Right.
What, like you talked a little bit about coming from a small school and then going to a small junior college, but what were some of the things in that transition that were difficult for you?
Well, like I said, being, and I wasn't far away from home either. I was about an hour away from home. So I would come home on some of the weekends and stuff like that. But I think just that freedom, having the freedom of, I get to make the choices now how to spend my time. I'm in charge of everything, basically. But again, like you said, going into that program, I thought I was pretty skilled as a basketball player, and going into a program, even at junior college, I realized how little I knew about the game. And so I felt like I was playing catch up, and I always relied on my athleticism. And I felt like I didn't know a lot about the little things that I could have been doing. I didn't work out at all. I didn't lift weights at all to be strong that way. I just pretty much depended on my athleticism, and I'd always had success with that. So again, going in, we were very competitive. Both years I played, we went to the Final Four in community college for the state of California. So we actually, my freshman year, we didn't go. We went into the tournament. We didn't make it to the Final Four, but my sophomore year we did, and I played all the time. And on that team. That pressure, and then everyone else that showed up was as skilled as I was. It was a matter of a good thing I had a work ethic, because I feel like you really have to work hard once you get there. So for me, time management, all that, and again, it was just an emotional time for me. I felt like sometimes I was a failure. My whole town basically, was so happy to see me go on and play. And so if I didn't do well, I felt like I was letting down my family and the town and all that. You probably have a little bit of that too, right? Yeah. I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself. Looking back, I wish I would have just enjoyed the moment and had fun, and just, win, lose. If I played great, it's a good group of girls, that kind of thing. I did not have that mental clarity at the time.
Yeah. Well, and I think that pressure, even coming from like the community or family members, like it doesn't necessarily have to be intentional either. Like
I don't think it was. No, not at all.
And I had people, I had people come up to me like after I stopped playing and would be like, "How's basketball going?" And they hadn't heard, and I was like, I always felt such like it was so awkward to be like, "Well, I'm not playing anymore," because it was a disappointment. When in reality, were they thinking that? Probably not.
No. Right.
But that, that's just something that you go through, especially I think the small town high school feeling gives you this feeling like you just carry so much weight on your shoulders, like going
Mm-hmm.
into a packed gym where like everyone in the community is at the game, and
Mm-hmm.
then to like step away from it and then come back and be like, well, that's the only thing that they saw me as, like, so if I'm
Right.
not that, then I'm nothing. Like, that's a hard thing to deal with.
Right. And then leading into, because probably your next question might be a little bit more after that, right? So when I went to Southern Oregon and transferred there, I decided not to play basketball or volleyball. And a lot of reasons. I had a rough transfer and I got down in the units. I took some classes I didn't want to be in. And so I actually was offered to, went out and worked out with the team, offered to redshirt, and then play the following year. And I just thought, no way, I'm not going to be able to go to practice. I don't love it that much to go to practice and then sit on the bench and then wait for a whole year to be able to go play in games. Looking back, I do regret because I loved the competitive game. And I didn't realize like you never get to do it again. So I do regret because I think I could have been successful. It happened like it was supposed to, but as we talked about, I talked with you about, I felt really lost there for a while because I had always identified as an athlete. So when I was not an athlete, I did not know what I was, and I hadn't found the teaching program yet. So I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I was just sort of floating around there for a while, and I felt like I was at a decent school, but there really was there were cliques. There were the athletes, there were the academics. I didn't really know where I fit in at all until, and I'm a type A personality. I'm very driven, and so once I found my people and the teaching program, I really clung to that and took off and grew and learned to love it there. But until that, there was a real sketchy time in the middle where I just didn't quite know what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, even transferring to another school, again, I think
Right.
that's a
Right.
big challenge for people who do go the junior college route. Like, I think it's a blessing in a lot of ways, like financially, depending on the level, like you can get some more experience at a college level and not at the highest level, like that is all great. But also, if you are planning to transfer somewhere else, whether it be for a sport or not, you're now in this new school older than all the other incoming,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
students typically,
Yep.
unless you have other transfers. And that just brings a whole new, issue of figuring out where you stand, who you can fit in with. Like, I know even for me, I wasn't even playing a sport when I transferred, but going from being an athlete and like having that group to
Right.
then not even being a freshman, so you can't, hang out with the new freshmen that are also like, what am I doing? But then it seems like sometimes those, junior, senior people, they've been there for a couple of years. They've already got
Right.
their stuff figured out and their people
Right.
and everything. So it can be a really hard spot to be in if you can't find those people. And I think that just speaks to like what sports can do too, with like providing, especially in college, like friends right off the
Right.
bat. Like,
Instant friend group. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And sometimes you don't find those in your classes, especially if you're taking general ed classes and you kind of see a mix of people in your classes, you don't connect as much. And once again, not that it was a negative, but I was with my sister still. And so we went to the same college after our community college together, and lived together. And so we were close, but I think finding friends was even harder that way. So I felt like I connected more with my um, community college friends or friends from back home, still staying in touch rather than branching out and making new friends until I got to the teaching program. And then I really did. I really
yeah.
did.
Yeah, so you did talk a little bit about, your decision to stop playing, but what did it really look like for you to shift priorities? Because obviously going from being an athlete or a student athlete, at
Hmm.
the college level, and then to just being a student, not an athlete, how did you shift your priorities, and also how did you stay involved in sports?
So I worked, I got a job, part-time job, and then I really focused on my studies. Like I told you about, the whole B thing really got and got to me. So I was a straight A student from that point on. So I really focused on school. But I did have some, I was in a co-ed volleyball class, was amazing. Like I loved that. That kept me involved. I ran all the time. I was, I didn't ever lift weights. I didn't really get into that, but I kept active that way. I continued to work every summer at my community college, doing basketball camps and that kind of thing. So where I really sort of shifted my mindset a little bit more towards coaching in that regard, or like being a counselor and helping. Playing too, I still got to play, but it was as a role model or a teacher that way. So really fed into my career path and being a teacher and all that. I'm an elementary school teacher, but I coached in junior high, and that helped with high school and that kind of stuff later in my life. So I would say, but it was hard. But I do think I stayed involved, to the best that I could.
Yeah.
With sports.
Well, and I have to mention, like, you weren't just a scrub. Like, even later on, like, you would come in and scrimmage with our team, and no one wanted to guard you because you were better than the majority of our high school athletes, even when I was in high school. So, not necessarily in your prime, athletic career, but you still were.
Thank you. And we did do, the adult volleyball class, and I still was on my A game, right?
And you still do. You still probably could take me one-on-one. I mean, I would maybe take it easy on you. So like you said, you kind of started coaching different sports. You didn't necessarily always coach just your favorite sports. Like, I mean, you and Dad both helped with a lot of different stuff since we were super involved as kids, but what did you enjoy just about coaching younger kids? Because, I mean, when did you kind of start coaching? Like, I mean, it was as soon as we were playing any sport, really, like soccer.
That was, and I never played soccer. So that was kind of and it was, 4 and 5-year-olds in soccer or T-ball, those kind of things, where I did play softball. So I knew a lot about the game there, but, just to be around the kids are so excited. Sports are amazing. They're so much fun. I brought the fun back into it, and you can be competitive, but at that level, not super competitive. And, I have talked, like, I either need to coach where everybody plays and we have fun, or, oh my gosh, we're going to win no matter what. Like, there's not a lot in between for me. But yeah, just when you guys started playing, and not even necessarily games, flag football, I was out there kind of helping too. Didn't know much about the game, but just the energy that kids bring to it, the fun factor, all the things you can learn by, the teamwork and the work ethic and all that good stuff. Really found a pull in all that and a lot of joy there. So,
yeah. What were some of the challenges that you had being a coach? Because, I mean, also, I would like to mention, like, small town can be a very tough place to be, like I guess a pillar in the community of, like, oh, this is one of our coaches. Like, you see people not only at practice, but you might have them in your classroom, or I might go to school with them, like those kind of things. What were some of the unique challenges there?
So challenge too is obviously parents too. You kind of get an idea about perspective. Like, every parent thinks their kid is amazing and the best. I coached you, and we kind of talked about there's only one way to coach or 2 ways to coach your kid. You're either way too easy or way too hard. I was the way too hard. You had to play harder than everyone else to get a spot, and I will always say I'm hardest on you because I love you the most. So parents, whenever we got into kind of playing time issues and stuff like that, parents were hard. Also, with your age, I saw these kids all the time. I was a Sunday school teacher. I was a Girl Scout leader. I was some of their, when Allison, my youngest daughter, I was their teacher. I was their first grade teacher. I wore a lot of hats. And so to see some of those kids then maybe talk back to me or have an attitude or whatever, I was like, man, I helped raise you, or like, I taught you. So that part was challenging. Because it is the same kids, but there was way more good than bad.
Yeah. Well, and it was really special to get to have you as a coach. And because you were harder on me, I feel like it was a good experience. I mean, did I appreciate all of the, like, car rides home after the game and hearing everything I did wrong? No, not at the time, but
there was always positive thrown in there too. Come on.
Looking back, it was great. But in the moment, I was like, oh, my parents are my coaches. Like, what? This is ridiculous. I get, yelled at way more than everyone else. But, I mean, I think that helped us. Like, when I say us, like, Ryan and Allison also,
Mm-hmm.
like I know had a similar experience of like maybe not always appreciating the hard, like the tough love, especially
Mm-hmm.
like in games and that sense. But I think it really helped us, and it was a really sweet experience that we got to do together. And I think also
Yeah.
just having like the whole family involved in sports, like
Right. I
we
was going to
just
echo that. That's my favorite part of being. I always coached your guys' teams. You know, it wasn't like I went somewhere you were playing this and I was going to coach something over there. No, I got to spend that time with you. So
yeah,
that was the major purpose of it. So.
yeah, it was yeah, definitely a sweet time. I want to, before we talk more about like having kids as athletes,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the lessons that you tried to instill in your players? I know that you're a teacher with young kids, so there's
Right.
obviously you play a big role in who they become, because you spend the most time with them at
Mm-hmm.
this time in their life. So with kind of that in mind, what were some of the lessons with those athletes that you were trying to instill at a young age?
Well, I always told you that you can control two things in the game, your work ethic and your attitude. So I'm happy to say that from a very young age, you were always the one running to the next drill or to the, whatever. And then not getting on, being a leader out there, picking your teammates up. Super proud of all three of you. And I do feel like that was instilled from a young age, right? That is, and again, how to be a teammate, how to have conflict and still resolve it. I know I was so impressed with you and Ryan and Allison too, of you don't have to be best friends with your teammates. And you weren't a lot of times, and you don't even have to like them. Sometimes you don't. And, but you still have to be their teammate, and it's your job to, hey, if they're open, you got to give them the ball. If they're on, you got to give them that set, those kind of things. And I feel like that's a life lesson. You don't have to be friends with everyone, but you have to be respectful and get along. Work ethic is huge because I think I don't see that in kids these days. Persevere through. I have to share just a quick story about you, and it wasn't even a sport. Well, dance, which I didn't. Again, one more that I didn't do, but I remember practicing the little moves and dance moves and helping you when you first started with tap and all that.
And karate with Ryan. I mean, you
Absolutely.
had the moves.
Absolutely. That's what we do as parents. That's what we do. But I just remember like the standing back bend. You couldn't do it right away. And I thought to myself, this is a huge lesson for you of if I keep practicing, I will get it. And you did. And that's part of being a parent and a coach is when you see the kid or like, again, shooting a left-handed layup in a game, high speed, I taught them that. So I was the one jumping and cheering more than anyone on the sideline because that's my victory too. I get that. So that's where coaching, it really feeds you, the rewarding part of it. But, also just like if you're going to do it well, do it to the best of your ability. That's kind of what I teach my kids to, even from a young age in my classroom. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it to the best of your ability. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think I could see like how passionate you were about sports through your coaching, but I think it was cool that you got to kind of have that almost like mending your relationship with the sport a little bit with like some
Yeah.
of the hardship and like
Mm-hmm.
not getting to play anymore, having to make that decision, like, and then also like the competitiveness. Like that is such a real thing that I think we don't really think about as athletes, is like how competitive we are, and how when we no longer have the competitive game in our life, it's like how do we do that in a healthy way? Like
Right.
I've talked to people before that are like, I wanted to be the biggest drinker because I was like, I got to be competitive. And like like when
Yeah.
you're
Well, so
older stuff,
you
like
want to be the best at something, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's an unhealthy thing. Like
Right.
you turn to alcohol or
Right. Right.
drugs, whatever. I mean, again, that's maybe extreme,
Right.
but
Right.
like having some healthy outlet of how to do that. And for you, it was instilling the competitiveness in us. And not
Right.
to say that like you weren't still like a like an encourager, because that I think you did a really good job of being ultra competitive and very tough on us, but like you said, you were celebrating the wins, like the
Mhm.
not necessarily just like the win, but the
Right. The
wins,
little
all the
wins.
little wins.
All the little wins along the way. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's cool that you got to make that a positive, impactful thing, using that competitiveness and shifting it into that. So I do want to talk a little bit about your experience as a parent of
Right.
athletes. Um, I know that your competitiveness really shows as you watch games, as you pace. Well, maybe more worry sometimes, but pacing and a little bit nervous energy in watching games. So what is that experience like?
Yeah, that's what, because when we talked about this, I said I really want to shift into a little bit of being a parent of athletes, because that's where I'm living, right? I all through you, and now Ryan's still playing, and then Allison's still playing for a couple more years. It is the hardest thing in the whole wide world to sit and watch your kid play. It's so rewarding, but like, you just can't do anything but pray for them and cheer for them. And you have all that adrenaline in you, and when you play, you get it out. I was always a bundle of nerves right before that first tip off, and then once the ball got tipped off or served or pitched or whatever, it was going. Like, I burned it out, and I was very focused and could use that. Well, when you're a parent, you don't have that. I can't sit down. Never paced more than when you were pitching, or watching Ryan play football. Same thing with Allison. It's track meet, whatever, when she's doing her stuff. It's, again, and I don't even hope for the win or the success. I worry about you getting hurt, or I worry about your heart. I just want it to be positive and a good lesson. Even if you fail, sometimes you fail and it's the best thing that could ever happen, to not do well. It's okay. You learn life lessons, and I kind of have that perspective, but it is very hard. It's the best thing ever, though. I live for game nights. It's so much fun. And so it's coming up on a time when I might not be doing it. Get emotional. Might not get to do it anymore. Then I get to wait for grandkids.
We got a long ways to go for that one.
I'll be very supportive there too, though. It's sport is so much a part of our life and a part of who we are and how we have fun with each other. It's so rewarding. So it's been a great ride.
Yeah. Well, and it's something we've always gotten to do together too. Like,
yeah.
I know even growing up, I mean, I don't get to see as much of Allison's games as I, wish I could now being out of state, but like I was at every one of Ryan's games in high school, or even like younger. I mean, Allison slept in the gym during 6 a.m. volleyball practice. Like,
absolutely. Yep.
It was always just something we did together. And I mean, I think it's still continued too, of even like, we can go to the gym and just shoot around together. And like, that's a fun, like, after church thing that we could just do on like a Sunday afternoon or something like that. Never really has ended, even like with like me not being in a on a competitive team anymore or anything, but even like getting to go see Ryan in a couple weeks to play at Harvard, like, just those are some of the best experiences and the best memories that I have, is in a gym or on a field, not even necessarily when I was playing,
And heck, you don't need a gym. You could have the little tiny basketball hoop in the living room, shooting in there.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
that too.
Yeah, get dunked on by my younger brother. There's many of those days.
Yep.
So you did touch on this a little bit, but I do want to know kind of what you see happening with youth and high school athletics today. I know, like, the culture, especially in like our small town and other places where you've been kind of involved, has changed a little bit. I think COVID, really shifted some things, just with how kids have grown up and what is normal and what's, I guess, acceptable now, those kind of things. So what change do you see happening right now?
And I think it's changed quite a bit, honestly. That's why I couldn't coach high school athletics in a small town right now, because I would not put up with bad behavior. I just feel like there's a lot of poor behavior, poor sportsmanship, those kind of things. I'm just old school that way. You don't show your emotion on the court. You always are hustling. You never talk back to the coach, those kind of things. And I see kids nowadays who do that, and they still get rewarded by being on the floor, that kind of thing. I feel like, again, work ethic, in my opinion, is COVID just sort of highlighted that. I think you kind of went one of two ways. You either rolled over and said, all right, we're staying home, and you got lazy and you didn't want to go back to work or to school, or like our family, you find a way around it. You again, like you were at SWAC, practicing in a mask and just hoping to have games, went to go play with 5 people because you just wanted to play. Ryan never had more basketball games than he did that year because we went and found a gym to play in, so I just feel like that was a really, for our family, a lesson of, sports are important, work's important, school's important. When we get to actually get through this, we're going to come out better on the other end. And I feel like some people maybe have not quite recovered from that. And with kids in sports, I really do see, again, the respect issue, the work ethic, those things. I don't see the parent involvement. Like our small town, once, we're just about done with this town. And I'm not saying there's some great athletes. There haven't been as many parents stepping up and say, taking a club team like I did, or taking the AAU basketball team, the whole group of kids in an age group, to go play club basketball. I just don't see the involvement necessarily as much, which makes me sad. I mean, maybe it'll come back. It's just kind of gone downhill.
Yeah. Well, and especially at a small school, like, you need that stuff. I mean,
Yes,
you look
to
at
be competitive. Yeah.
to be competitive, and even to provide opportunity for athletes to potentially keep playing. I mean,
Right.
you don't get the looks from really many schools. I mean, some junior colleges in the area know of the school and maybe know the coaches a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But you even look at like Ryan, like, he's playing at a Division I school now, and it was not because he just showed up on, every, Friday night his senior year or whatever to be scouted. Like, he put in all the work at like extra camps, or like
Right.
playing on travel teams, like, and it not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily even just in football, but like
Football. Right.
just in general, being, I think he was a very well-rounded athlete, which
Right.
helped, later
And
on. But
everything. Yeah.
yeah, but that doesn't come with just only playing during the
In your high school.
season.
Yeah. In
Like,
your high
you've
school
got to
season.
have,
Mm-hmm.
extra stuff, and that's, requires parents typically. I mean, sometimes the high school coaches might do it, but again, they're probably parents. Majority of them
Right.
are.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just very typical in a small town, especially. What do you think are some changes maybe that are necessary, other than parents stepping up? What else maybe needs to be done?
I really think it starts when they're young. So I've got a good little end where I'm at in first and second grade. I'm doing second this year, but I've taught first for the last 10 years here. And so I do believe it is a culture. It does start at home with the parents, but it's a culture of these kids learning. We had a motivational speaker who's amazing come and say, to the kid, you can do hard things. I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for my own decisions. There's a lot of things out of my control, but what can I control? And I get to make those decisions, those good, healthy decisions on the path of my life. So I feel like, though, I have a good start. Junior high is a tough age. I mean, really tough age. And I think that's where they need the most support, where I feel like sometimes they get the least support. And so then going into high school, again, I feel like there needs to be a focus on the whole group of kids. I know, like, even in our small town, some parents will take just their one kid to go play club. And that doesn't really help the team, because then you've got one skilled kid, especially volleyball and basketball. You've got one skilled kid, and then kids that are not as skilled because they didn't have the opportunity. They're athletic and all that. So it's a tough one. I think it's kind of a culture that we could probably shift by saying we all need Jesus. So that might be a shift into my next question, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's clear, like, our family values sports a lot, but also, like, our faith is super important. And so I think it's cool that on this podcast, like, I get to talk to a lot of people who do share that faith.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's even more special to talk to, like, you, or like my brother, or people that I know a lot better in that story.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yours is a really unique one. So do you want to share a little bit about your testimony, and then we can talk about your accident,
Right.
included in that?
Well, it's funny because I did not grow up in a religious household. So both my parents went to church all the time when they were kids. And for whatever reason, when they got married, they decided that they didn't want to take us to church, which was, that whatever. But I don't remember a time when I was a kid that I didn't talk to God. So I've always felt a very strong connection. In high school, I sought it out more. I had some friends and ended up going to church with them and really feeling, the Holy Spirit and overwhelmed that God is in my life and doing these things. So, but no more than when I was a parent. I mean, that's the biggest, I don't know how anybody who can be a parent that can't just be praying all the time because you love your kids so much. And, you just feel like there's so much good in the world when you have kids, and feel that love, like you can't love them anymore. So, but that was another huge Jesus moment when I had my accident, when I had you.
So do you want to
Again,
tell the story, because not
sure.
everyone knows, and it is
Yeah. Well, yeah, most people know. Anyway, almost 9 months pregnant, slid on black ice, had a car accident and broke my neck. Fractured, like hit really hard, fractured my vertebrae. Had you emergency C-section, got a nice little plane ride. Couldn't stop the labor and had you while in traction. So yeah, that was how you came into the world. So I can just remember feeling a really strong presence of, God watching over me at that moment, going, okay, you've got a lot to do still, and I don't need to take you right now. So, and just the recovery and all that too was so hard that I just felt, I had a lot of help. I had a lot of help from above on that one. So I felt really close to God through my hardship, because that was the hardest thing I'd ever gone through in my life. I realized I had lived a very privileged life up to that point. And, not that I didn't have my little things here and there, but that was a really hard time that I felt like I wouldn't have gotten through without my faith. So,
yeah. Well, and I
yeah.
think, I was there, but not not really aware.
Yeah.
But I've
Right.
heard the story many times, and I know that there was a lot of fear with a lot of people, because it was a really scary experience, but
Hmm.
just the observers of the situation, one of the things that I've always heard is that you were just so, like, strong and almost like calm. Like, yes, it was incredibly scary, but I think that is a really really cool thing to be able to experience in a really hard time too, to like know that like things were going to work out the way they were supposed to, almost like,
Hmm.
again, not to say that it wasn't a scary time, but you definitely could have handled it in a way that was like, this is not what I signed up for. I don't want to do this. Like, I'm done, tapped out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that wasn't the way. And even, after I was born and everything, like, yes, you did have help and stuff, but you didn't just roll over and be like, okay, I'm in a neck brace. Like, I'm done. Like, you were immediately involved and just like really leaned into motherhood, obviously. And again, like, then had two more kids after that traumatic experience. So,
Those
um,
are a piece of cake, man. Piece of cake
I
compared
know
to that
I
one.
was
Yeah.
the hard one.
Yeah.
But I got a good story.
You do have a good story. Yeah. I mean, just to expand on that a little bit, I just feel like you don't know how strong you are until you're put in a position where you have to be. And I just felt like the Lord knew I could handle all that. And I don't know how, but I just had that peace. Not that it wasn't hard, and I didn't have some breakdowns and some moments where I was really scared, because I was, but I just knew that it was going to be okay. And that I just, I knew that wow, he really thinks I'm pretty tough, because I don't I don't know how, but it was very character building for sure. And again, so I do think going on in my life, I can look back on that and say I went through something really hard, and again, with a little bit of grace, tried to go with a little bit of grace, thank the Lord for all that, and just have some perspective of I can do hard things. I've got a lot of people I need to touch still. So
Yeah. Well, and that's just, I think that's a lot of people's stories with like testimonies too. Like, and it's not always like this crazy thing that happens. Like, that was a
mhm.
very dramatic situation. Like
Right.
it was a lot more than a lot of people will experience. But even like me with my injury, like any kind of time that we're in suffering and have to lean on the Lord, like that's just a time where we can see like his strength in us. Um, and so I think it's cool to always like, mention that, and talk about your story. I mean, this lady got out of the car by herself with a broken neck. Like, can't be
I didn't know
tougher
it was
than that.
broken, to be fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it was, ladies and gentlemen. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm super grateful that you were so tough, and I think also a big part of why you walked away from that was getting to be my mom and
Mhm.
Ryan and Allison's mom, and getting to show us what it looks like to you know embrace the hard things and not let them consume you, and just keep moving with your life in the way that God has things planned for you. um
Mhm.
I want to know, you touched a little bit on this, like talking about people needing Jesus, but how do you think faith can play a role in athletics?
And I so wish that I had been a better Christian at the time of when I played, because I do feel like I had a really good influence. My parents were really good influences on me as far as my work ethic, my respect, and that kind of thing. And so whether they took me to church or not, there was always they're just good people and taught me to be a good person. But I do feel like it's huge. It's huge because just in general, there's a higher you have a higher purpose, and the glory that you have is all God's glory. He provides you with everything that you are able to do, say on a court or on a field. So I love seeing the athletes now of days who acknowledge that, and who have the platform, who will acknowledge like the glory to God. Like it's all him. It's all him. I'm a much smaller piece, and I'm a piece in something that's so much larger. So I wish I would have had that as an athlete. But I do have that as a parent and as a coach and as a spectator. Just to know that all those gifts come from God, and to enjoy it, because he wants you to enjoy it. That's why he's put you in that position to play
Yeah,
whatever you play.
yeah. Well, and I think it's also like, yes, you may see success, and giving the glory back to God is awesome, but also like knowing your identity in Christ sets you up for so much more success after the sport is
Right.
done. Like, I mean, even growing up like in the church, like I didn't really have a solid like idea of who I was in Christ until I kind of was like had to question it, because then I was
Mhm.
no longer an athlete. And I think that's a very typical experience for people to, even if you do have a good relationship with God, like you don't realize how much emphasis you put on that identity as an athlete.
Right.
And so having that background, like I'm like, I don't know how I would have made it had I not had, number one, like you guys at home being super supportive, and number two, like knowing that there was a purpose for my life outside of basketball, and like even
Mhm.
if that was no longer what I got to do, that there was still a reason why I was living.
Mhm.
I don't know what I would have done without that. And even then it was still really tough. Like I still really felt challenged, and had to kind of shift my mindset of like who I was, but I did have that foundation. And so I think
Mhm.
those that don't, like, it can be really really hard to figure out what the point is after your sport is done, whether that be an injury or even just like you go to college for 4 years and then you're done. Like figuring out that transition, I think is a lot easier and smoother when you do have that piece of your life
Right.
figured out.
The faith. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up with our last question?
I don't think so. We've really had a good talk. It's been
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
I was
well,
nervous. I liked it. I mean, I've seen obviously your podcast and they're very good. But I was kind of nervous about coming on, but it's been easy to talk to. And I'm so proud of you.
thanks for being here. Yeah, so the last question, everyone gets to answer this one on the podcast. What does it look like for you to live authentically?
So I've had thought a lot about it because I've heard you ask it on the podcast. So authentic to me means realness, and being human. And again, like I said, I'm very type A. So very much a perfectionist, have always been. So I've really think being authentic is acknowledging your progress over perfection on anything that you do, and know that for me personally, I'm constantly striving to be the best version of myself that I can be. So I'm a work in progress, but I'm real. Obviously I make mistakes, and it's hard, but it's okay. Give myself grace. And then, but just constantly learning and striving to be, again, I'm a teacher. I try to be the best teacher every day I can. I'm a mom. I try to do that well. I'm a wife. I try to do that as well as I can. And I have my days where I do better, but yeah, and being human and enjoy the experience.
Yeah. So good. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I know.
Thank you for having me.
I know I've gotten to experience a lot of really great things from you, but I wanted everyone else to get to hear about some of your experiences, because your pep talks or getting to vent to you has always been really helpful for me. But I know like you've got a lot of wisdom, and I'm glad that you were willing to share it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We would love to hear what you found valuable in this episode. So please DM us on Instagram at Authentic Performance or leave a review. They're super, super helpful for us. We're so thankful that you're on this journey with us and want to invite you to be a part of the Authentic Performance fam. You can check out more of how we're supporting athletes at theauthenticperformance.com. Also, let us know what you want to hear on the podcast next, or who you want to hear. We appreciate your feedback and want to give you the best possible resources and support. In the meantime, think about how you can live authentically. See you next time.